Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Guido, the CEO and co-founder of Trail of Bits. Um, I founded Trail of Bits about 8 years ago to work on the most difficult problems in software security. And I don't see our slides yet, but I'll just keep talking.
Sorry, they
Ah,
won't. It won't let me full screen it.
there we go. Okay. Um, I'm joined here with a few of my colleagues in the chat window and in the screen sharing and the video. You'll see Ryan Stortz, principal software engineer. You'll see Matt Reinhardt, one of our product managers. You'll see Justin Roosboom, one of our product designers. And I believe Amelia's here too, our operations manager. So you can advance to the next slide. Like I said, we are a software security company trying to work on the most challenging problems in the space. We want to help advance the fundamental science that underpins the whole field. So I founded the company 8 years ago with just a few friends of mine, and we bootstrapped it to what we are now today, which is approximately a $20 million company with about 67 people working for us. The company's always been hybrid remote. We've had people that work in far-flung corners of the world, as well as a headquarters in New York City. You have to go where the talent is for software security expertise. There's really just not that many of us, which is why I do so much outreach like this to communities like Power to Fly. I think that sounds good for this slide. Let's continue. So Trail of Bits is primarily a consulting firm. What are you doing back there? Trail of Bits is primarily a consulting firm. Give me this. Not right now. We help companies deal with their most difficult software security challenges. We do that across the defense, tech, and finance industry primarily, and we do that through a couple of different methods of working with them. One thing that we do is we do software security research. We work with the US government, DARPA, the National Science Foundation, and we get to work on long-term research projects, usually 4 years long, to make progress on a fundamental issue in the field. So a really great example is the SIEVE program that we just began working on. We have a blog post out about it. If you go check out blog.trailofbits.com, you can read more up on it. But it's a cryptographic research project that is trying to prove that zero-knowledge proofs are capable for use in real life. We could talk about what that is later, in the Q&A, but suffice to say, all the security research that we do is like alien technology. It's really fun stuff. Now, because we have a whole team of people that know how to engineer software and apply research, we're also quite good at developing software. So we have a security engineering team. Lots of technology companies hire us to build software for them. A little bit more mundane. We're not trying to get people to the moon, but they do have really immediate security operations challenges, security monitoring challenges that need to get solved with custom software. So a lot of what we do is take open source software and build and maintain it so it's usable inside of a large enterprise. The security engineering team is also the folks that you're speaking to today. We're going to be talking about one of the products that we've built internally that we're really proud of. Now, the last team that lives inside Trail of Bits is our security assurance team, or our security assessments team. This is where we use our expert knowledge of how software can fail to help companies build their own products and make them safe for other people to use. This is a highly active team in the company. It's probably the largest team in the company. It's probably about 40–50% of all the people that are doing work for Trail of Bits. So companies will provide us their source code, we'll review their source code, work with their engineering team, help them understand where risks and hotspots are in their code, and then what they should do to overcome those issues and make their products safe for general use. Really great example here is Zoom. So I think that's the next slide, or no? No, okay. So as a small company, we really have to focus our efforts. We can't work on everything under the sun. What we want to do instead is be the best in the world at the small number of areas of expertise that we have. So I'm really happy to say that I think we're among the best in the world at things like low-level engineering, binary analysis, blockchain security cryptography, and software development specifically for security products. This allows us to get a lot more momentum, a lot more detailed knowledge for each of these fields. That then helps us solve more complex problems and eventually get more recognition really for all the developments that we've built on in each of these fields. So low-level engineering is like operating system internals, programming languages, that sort of thing. Binary analysis is what do you do when you don't have source code for a product and you need to find vulnerabilities in it, or you'd like to modify its functionality. Can you do that without the source code? So we have tools for that and research for that. Blockchain security is super fun because the consequences for failure are enormous. If you can't build a secure blockchain product, you might lose hundreds of billions of dollars. And cryptography is pretty similar. Cryptography is very brittle. It's great when it works, but if it has even the most minor failure, you lose all your keys. So those are the kinds of areas that we like to work in because they're high risk. There are actual consequences for failure, and they usually broker access to your most secret data for a company. So go on. We're really happy to work with a lot of the most major players in the technology industry in the world. The people that are building the most advanced technology work with us to help make it safe. So, we work on a dozen or more DARPA projects when people are trying to figure out how to fly planes in the air and not make them fall out of the sky. They end up talking to us when they're processing billions of credit card transactions. The kinds of problems that you run into are the kinds of problems that we're able to help people solve. So go on. So at this point, I'd like to hand it off to Ryan, Matt, and Justin. Like I said, we have some really interesting internal developments that I think are very relevant right now that we'd like to share with you. Ryan's going to talk you through what those are and what we've done and what you could take away. So enjoy.
Thanks. Yeah, as Dan said, I'm Ryan Storrs. I'm a principal engineer here at Trail of Bits, where I largely focus on our iOS security product, iVerify, which is the subject of this talk. I have an hour for the talk, and I don't really want to go over painstaking detail of everything because it's just a simple iOS app. So I'd like it to be a little interactive. If you have questions, feel free to, unmute and ask or use the react button. And then hopefully someone will let me know that you're asking and then I can call on you. So this presentation starts with a little bit about iVerify and how it came about. After that, we'll discuss iOS and mobile device security. And we'll end with a discussion about iVerify's development process, some work in progress redesign, and I'll be able to field some questions about mobile security. So for most of us, our phones keep our most personal secrets and moments. They protect our private messages, pictures, passwords, bank account details, and our really good memes. Mobile device security is important. It's also very confusing and difficult, even if you know what you're doing, to do the right things and know that you're doing the right things. I find it hard myself to keep up with the latest features and their impact on security and privacy. And I'm sure most others are in the same position. And unfortunately, failure to keep up with this information has the potential to have real and negative consequences for many people, especially people who are, political dissidents or targets of intimate partner violence or just journalists, politicians, all of these people. Much like the health supplement market, the cybersecurity market is full of bad information by people who want to sell you something. And it's filled with, pedantic nerds like myself who get lost in the details and have trouble offering good actionable advice. So it's hard to know who to trust. So iVerify is an iOS application for the iPhone and iPad. We bill it as your mobile security toolkit. We hope, iVerify helps clarify a lot of these open questions people have about mobile security. So iVerify gives you easy to digest information on how to secure your mobile phone, what each of these settings mean, and what settings are even available. And we do that by providing guides on how to limit your data exposure, protect against theft, and show you how to review for signs that your phone has been compromised or hacked. We have a high rating on the App Store. There's a detection SDK that you can build into your own apps. With that said, our high-level problem statement is, well, I'm not going to read all of this, but iOS users require a solution that enables them to easily configure the device to keep personal data safe, be notified if vulnerabilities are discovered, and stay informed about emerging security concerns. And I think we can all agree with that. And I think our value proposition for that is we provide a comprehensive, easy-to-use security toolkit. So let's talk about our customer security concerns. When we started iVerify, it focused mostly on one specific concern, which is mostly my concern and Dan's concern, which is how can I tell if somebody has hacked and jailbroken my phone? As a security expert, jailbreaking a phone is a bad thing. Jailbreaks intentionally weaken the security and privacy controls of your phone. It's true that they provide you more control over your device, but they do it by disabling useful security controls. In the past, people who have intentionally jailbroken their phones have been advantageously targeted. A specific example is not the current Hong Kong protest, but the one prior in 2014. There was a malware sample that I got my hands on that was it only worked on protesters' phones that were previously jailbroken, and it targeted them and targeted this chat application they were using called Torch or something that was local only, Bluetooth only chat. So it wasn't easy for the Chinese intelligence apparatus to spy on it. So iVerify was largely targeted towards myself as a customer, and Apple creates these walled gardens that make it very difficult to see what is happening. So we were trying to work around that. And this, jailbreak detection and everything is still part of iVerify, but realistically, very few attacks like that, attacks where you're surreptitiously jailbroken and spied on, actually happen to real people. And when they do happen, they're perpetrated by nation states, and they're targeting politicians or, political dissidents, which is an important customer segment, but it doesn't help the vast majority of people. So outside of my own personal paranoia, how are people targeted, and what can we do to fight that? So we've broken it down into 4 threat areas. Hackers who want your data, accounts, Bitcoin, whatever. Companies that want to track you and sell your data for profit. Law enforcement that wants to get into your phone for all reasons. And people who may be targets of stalking or harassment from their intimate partners. And I'm going to go through each of these. So hackers are the traditional enemy in cybersecurity. Their goal is to make money off of you and steal from you. The security model of iPhones don't really offer hackers many opportunities to do this, but social engineering is still very effective. Additionally, if the target does something to intentionally compromise, as my Hong Kong example showed, they can advantageously target people, and like these things get much easier to do. The second threat area is corporations. So corporations, specifically advertisers and social media companies, are our second concern. Corporations building extensive databases on our behavior, our likes, dislikes, political preferences, our entire digital lives to make money off somehow. We would like to limit their collection. And I have this quote here from Maciej Siglowski. In a world where everything is tracked and kept forever, like the world for some reason building, you become hostage to the worst thing you've ever done. Whoever controls that data has power over you, whether or not they exercise it. And we treat this data with the utmost carelessness, as if it held no power at all. So once collected, this data is incredibly difficult to get rid of. And the best approach is to never make this data public in the first place. Our third concern, and timely, is law enforcement, which includes local police, national law enforcement like the FBI, and customers and border officers, including international national law enforcement or domestic law enforcement and state security, and, not just U.S. centric. In the U.S., Customs and Border Patrol have like an enormous jurisdiction and extensive powers, and they routinely seize mobile phones for searching. And they have these law enforcement agencies have sophisticated tools and are dedicated and well funded. They generally want to unlock your phone to do forensics. They want to know who you've been messaging, what the contents of the messages are, emails, call data, social media accounts, location data. Really, they want anything they can get their hands on. And thankfully, the tools that they have are not infallible, and there are some best practices to make that to frustrate those efforts. And our final concern is perhaps our most important. And admittedly, I knew very little about when I started this project, but intimate partner violence is widespread, and abusers leverage technology to track, harass, intimidate, and otherwise harm their victims. These abusers are dedicated, may have persistent access to their phones, and often know more about their victims. Often know enough about their victims to do a significant amount of damage. And with the current quarantine, domestic violence has skyrocketed, at least where I live in New York City. I think it's up like 40 or 50% compared to last year. So it's a big concern right now, and unfortunately, there's a market for like stalkerware that supports this, and there's also existing features on your phones that can be leveraged to conduct this harassment. So the threat landscape for our customers is fairly wide, but we feel that we can largely address each of these through a common set of guidelines and tools. And now that I've set up the why, let's cover the what. So what is iVerify exactly? As I said earlier, it's an iOS app, but we have four main feature areas: integrity scans, guides, news, and extensions. Our integrity scans are scans that we do in the background, and these generally this generally implements the jailbreak detection. And the reason we do this, is sorry, I'm losing my track of we do this, these integrity scans in the background by using some operating system level tricks to know if bad files or known bad folders or known bad settings have been set, things that indicate that you've been jailbroken. If your phone fails one of these background checks, we notify you with a push notification. And if it's not an intentional thing, we give you advice on what to do next. This was the initial feature, but it turns out that guides are the premier feature. They came second. They are by far the most useful feature, and it makes sense because this stuff is hard, and the trade-off between them settings is not entirely clear. So we have dozens of guides broken into a few categories. Protect against theft. In the screenshot here, you can see a few of the guides. Limit software exploits, prevent data leakage, review for signs of compromise, use good security software. We recommend a few pieces of security software to help secure your phone and your digital life, and then secure your online accounts. We teach you how to lock down important accounts like your Google accounts, and Facebook accounts, and Apple accounts. And there's an additional guide section that uses our extensions, which I'll talk about in a second. In each of these categories, we have 3 to 13 different guides on that each have an actionable step that it tells you why you should take some or do something, and then tells you how to do it. And you have the option to mark it as complete or ignore it. Um, and I should apologize up front when we write these guides and their justification. It's very hard to target a general audience. I know there's lots of jargon in there, and we're working on making that better. If you have feedback, I would love any feedback to make them more accessible. News is our newest feature. The news feed is meant to select a few relevant iOS and iPhone security news articles and provide some context and some actionable advice if needed. Think of it as a little bit like a more timely guide. And our final feature area is more like a category of features. These are our extensions, which you should consider to be privacy power tools, and there's 4 of them. DOH. So when you try to contact a website, you do this lookup to find out where the server is. It's called a DNS lookup. That lookup is in the clear normally. We have a feature extension that makes that lookup encrypted. So your local ISP or the Starbucks Wi-Fi or your school or your cell carrier can't see what the sites you're visiting. We have a content blocker. So it's perhaps a poor name for what it really is, but the iVerify content blocker makes sure you're only contacting websites using encryption, specifically HTTPS connections. It just uses the content blocker APIs to do that. It doesn't actually block content. We want to make sure we're contacting websites in the most secure way possible. We have our metadata removal extension. So it's common for pictures and videos to be tagged with GPS locations, the time of the picture, and other data that you might want to remove before you share these pictures, especially if you're like attending protests. And the metadata extension lets you remove this metadata, the metadata removal extension. And then we have our reboot reminder. The reboot reminder is a bit of an outlier, and the reason we included it isn't really straightforward. But basically, it's difficult for hackers to maintain access to your phone across reboots. An example is China. Early last year or 2 years ago, they were caught, the first time they were caught, exploiting the phones of the Uyghur minority group with iOS and Android 0 days, but they couldn't keep access to the phone if you rebooted your phone. So we have a little timely reminder to reboot your phone. I set it to once a week. And I'm sure I'm missing something or doing one of our features a disservice, but I think that's a good overview of what iVerify does for you. Next, I'm going to talk about development because we're here to hire for Trail of Bits and not entirely pitching the app. You know, at Trail of Bits, Dan covered our engineering practice. Our engineering practice is largely contract development for external parties, but we do have 2 products, one being iVerify, the other being Critic. Critic is a continuous security scanner for blockchain applications.
Give some context here too.
Sure.
Yeah. So, you know, when we think about how to set up the company from the IT resources that we've got, we want to be as flexible and nimble as possible. There's a lot of security companies that fall into the trap of like, no, you know, everything needs to be our data. It needs to be inside of a VPN, inside of a walled garden. And I have just thrown that out the window because we work with most of the teams that are building the software that we end up using. So like GitHub is a client of ours and I know how they're protecting our data and I'm fairly happy with it. So when we think about how do we collaborate with our remote team members, we've tried to adopt all the best practices, all the SaaS products that we can that you're probably already used to using. So GitHub Slack, Bitrise, GitHub Actions, Google Meet is really where we live. Makes it really easy because then I can hire people from wherever they are in the world and they can immediately participate in those conversations. So just like every other team at the company, our engineering team is very geographically dispersed. Ryan and I are in New York. Matt and Justin are in Denver. Amelia's in Wisconsin. Like it really doesn't matter the location. We've got another
Mhm.
person that works with us, Vlad, who's way out
Donuts.
Eastern Europe. Yeah.
Don't
so
apply.
uh, so um, I'm really happy with our kind of collaboration setup. Makes it pretty easy to work together. And yeah, the one other internal product that we're building is called Critic. So this really comes out of the idea that look, we're finding bugs in software all the time. And a lot of the bugs that we find in software are because we built special tools that help us find those bugs. But those special tools are usually kind of there's some rough edges to them, right? They're not exactly made for people outside of our team to use. We try our best, right? But at the end of the day, sometimes these things still require an expert operator. So what Critic does is it tries to drop that into the floor in terms of expertise required, so that instead of running a external application, you just integrate something into your GitHub. So Critic is a GitHub app, and you install it into your repositories, and then you get the benefit of a lot of the one-off tools that we've made to find bugs in your software.
Mhm.
Um, it's a way for us to extend our expertise out wider than we could if we were just doing consulting all the time. I think that's good.
Yeah. Um, yeah, as Dan said, we're generally remote first, especially now, right? Everyone's remote. But before this, we were more than 50% remote, and it'd be funny actually. Dan and I sit next to each other in our New York office, um, and we'd be joining the same meetings remotely, like both headphones on, facing the screen, like the camera, not facing each other or sharing a screen, because we're the two people next to each other. Everyone else, all the 6 7 other people would be all remote. um, yeah. And we use Google Meet and Slack for our planning, our iteration planning meetings and retrospectives. Yeah, very cloud first. um, iVerify code. So iVerify is a mix of these 4 languages right now. We The app is almost entirely in Swift. There's a handful of Objective-C lines, and we have a work in progress transition on our server side from Python to Kotlin. We do automated testing, but it's not extensive enough for me to put the numbers here, but we are making it better. Uh, Critic is written in Python and JavaScript, and the majority of our contract development work is in C++ and Python. Our assurance team does a huge mix of languages, and lately we've been seeing a big increase in requests for Go and Rust-based audits.
Yeah, it's one thing when you get to pick the language you use yourself. It's another thing when you've got a software company that just says, "Here, review my code," and they've got like 15 different languages, and you're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, you know how to review this, right?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure." Um, so it's a different language, a different framework, a different operating system, a different everything every week. You don't get it. It's what you do is you specialize in security. You don't specialize in a programming language,
yeah. Everyone makes cryptography bugs in every language, so I
right?
just look for those to start. um, yeah, and then a little bit of inside baseball. We're in the process of doing a redesign. We have a few design goals. The previous design was much more organic. It looks pretty polished, but there are rough edges, especially if you go into any menus. So we want to improve our user experience, our get a consistent interface, work on terminology. I mentioned that our terminology is kind of poor, very jargon heavy. Um, and we want to restructure some content and add and make a interface that also supports iPads as like a first class citizen, not just a bigger iPhone. And this mock on the right is where we're headed currently. We have a few screens here. We have light and dark theme. We currently do, but in the redesign, we're showing the dark theme. And then let me step back. No, I'll go for it. And then I thought it'd be fun to offer some actionable advice for the audience. I'm gonna stop sharing the slides. I'm gonna start sharing the iPhone simulator. Um, this, everyone can see like a iPhone with iVerify running.
Yeah,
Yes,
looks
I
good.
assume so. Yeah. So this is iVerify. It's running in a development environment called the iPhone simulator. Um, I can interact with it just like a phone. Um, and I wanted to walk through a few guides here um, to to share some examples. I picked under review for signs of compromise. So with domestic violence being such a they're having such a huge increase here, and then you know showing off features. Sorry, I thought it'd be prudent to show off a few features that that help for victims of domestic violence and IPV. So uh, we're gonna go through and do the review, the find my location sharing stuff. So I know I personally have had a situation where I'm traveling with friends or meeting with friends and I share my location, and then I might click share indefinitely and forget to go revoke that. So um,
So basically, these features can be abused real easily
yeah,
by somebody that turns them on, and you don't really get a good visual indicator when you're using your phone that they've been
yeah.
enabled.
So
So,
even if you're not worried necessarily about domestic violence, it's still useful to audit these things, is what I was trying to get to, but
yes.
lost my words. So if you want to follow along and you have an iPhone, I suggest you open your Find My app. You can do that by pulling down on the home screen and typing Find My, or finding the icon. Uh, the People tab should be selected by default, but if not, select People. And here you have a list of people you're sharing your location with. It should say it should say you're sharing with them. That might not say they're sharing with you. As you can see in the example, it says can see your location. You can go through and click this stop sharing my location with each of them. And once we're done with that, we would click I reviewed this. Additionally, Google Maps allows you to do location sharing. This is one that a lot of people don't really know about. And we want to go through and remove these as well. So open Google Maps and tap your little profile picture in the top right if you're logged in. There's a location sharing option in the menu as seen here. And you can go through and I actually I'm following along on my phone at the same time. I'm not sharing my location with anyone, so I have this like stay connected screen. But in the example here, it shows a list of your people you're sharing with. You can go through and unshare with each of them. And we have, dozens of guides here of different features like that. Just easy guides on how to follow or how to lock down your phone. And now back to the slides. So iVerify is on the App Store. I mentioned we're actually, because of an ZDNet article, we're number 5 in top paid apps. So we're normally around 75th. You can find it easily by searching iVerify or Trail of Bits. And it's a single purchase. There's no subscription. There's no in-app purchases. Once you buy it, you can share it with all of your other devices. There's a family sharing thing that I need to figure out exactly, but you should be able to share it with everyone on your account and family sharing. And now I'd like to ask you guys some questions because I have a little bit of a captive audience here, and I have user survey questions. So if you the way I'd like to go about this is just I'll ask the question and just unmute if you have any if you have feedback. So the top one is, what questions do you have about mobile device security that aren't really being answered elsewhere?
So we do have a couple questions from the chat
Oh,
box.
I can't
Let's
see
go
it.
through those really quick because I think they might be quick, and then we can get back to these.
Sure.
So really early on, let's see, somebody, Yura, asked a question about Zoom. So Yura, do you want to repeat your question, and then maybe I could take a shot at answering it? Can they come off mute, or should I just
They should be
take
able
the?
to unmute themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can unmute. Can you hear me, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, so you know how Zoom built, I'm talking not maybe your specialization more about mobile development, right? So in case of like desktop, but you mentioned encryption protection, etc. So, but you know, solutions that Zoom applied for application itself, like I mean that they like integrate local server, right, to bring all these connections, like to improve speed, right, of work. So they bring a lot of security holes. So and like encryptions or anything else in this case will not help. And we all know that like all this information about leaks of and other problems with Zoom security. So and like because you work with Zoom, so what you bring to them? So what your like company give Zoom like to be more secure?
Okay. So yeah, let me give you the broad answer. So every company that ships software sometimes potentially ships software that has bugs in it. And right now, a lot of the security of Zoom depends on the security of its clients. So things like the mobile apps and the desktop app and the Mac app and the Linux app and the Windows app and all the rest of those things. So a big part of what we do when we work with a firm like Zoom is we'll get source code to those specific programs and then help them identify what unsafe parts of the code look like and how they could change the code to make it more safe. So that's like step one. Now, step two is we also have a cryptography team. We have a specialized expertise in cryptography, which means that we've also played a role in helping them understand how to improve their end-to-end encryption and then develop the new features they've designed into the actual clients. So that ultimately what you're trying to do with end-to-end encryption is you want to trust the server less. You want to trust Zoom, the company, less, and you want to trust the actual client software more. So in newer versions of Zoom, like, you know, we're all in Zoom right now. Something that you might want to do either during this meeting or after it is go to the zoom.us menu up on the top left and go check for updates. Because a lot of the software changes that are being made in response to our recommendations are being included in new software updates, and you should take advantage of them. So go and check for updates. Same thing on the mobile apps, right? The mobile apps get pushed out, I don't know, every couple of days, a week, 2 weeks, whatever. Just make sure you're using the latest version because each of them contains security improvements that we helped encourage them to make. The way this overlaps with iVerify is pretty limited. iVerify protects your phone. It doesn't protect the apps on it. The apps are all sandboxed. They're all on their own, right? So if an app doesn't use HTTPS or doesn't use certificate pinning, and it sends out data unencrypted into the wide world, or you give data to some other company that then abuses that data, iVerify can do little to help you. What iVerify can do, though, is through a lot of the guides, can help educate you about how you can check privacy permissions on those apps. So maybe the apps are requesting access to data that they really shouldn't have. And iVerify will help walk you through exactly what you can do to disable those permissions so that the app couldn't ever possibly abuse your data because they just don't have access to it. But really, iVerify is trying to protect your phone. Okay, makes sense? Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
There was another question about.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I have a couple of private questions and then this public question. They're basically all the same, which is it for iPhone only?
Oh
It
yes.
is currently for iOS only. We do have an Android version in planning, but it's not far enough along for me to say when it would be available.
So Android presents a lot of really difficult challenges. Android is extraordinarily fragmented, and the guidance that we would provide or the checks that we would produce might work on a single phone, but they wouldn't work on every Android phone.
Yeah.
So a
There
lot
are
of this.
some things, oh, sorry. Yeah, there's some things that are possible with Android phones that are not possible with iPhones. So specifically, the idea around stalkerware is much, much easier to do on Android. But in general, there are, you know, actionable security things we can tell Android people, and we hope to have an app out for that.
Yep. Now, there was another question about law enforcement and the Patriot Act. So a couple things here. Law enforcement has always had privileges to, you know, request or force you to give access to certain things that are either in your possession, that are in your house. Anybody can always get a warrant to, you know, in the United States can get a warrant to access your mobile devices. What the Patriot Act changed was a lot of the national security letters. So they could directly request access to your data from a cloud provider or from somebody else that's storing it on your behalf. So the Patriot Act going into law was not necessarily what made this kind of an area of concern. Also important to understand that there are a lot of iVerify users that are outside the United States, and there's also lots of situations where a normal person can interact with law enforcement outside the United States. For instance, Customs and Border Patrol, not just for the United States, but for any other country, have wide privileges to access your data as you're transferring over a border. So one of the most risky places that you could find yourself is departing a plane that you just arrived, like in a European country. And those are those situations where you transfer yourself from a low risk situation to a high risk situation and might not even be aware of it. So being able to prepare for that situation with some of the guides and checklists and security, you know, mechanisms that are inside of iVerify tends to be pretty useful. Okay.
Yeah, going through more questions. You're asked if we use neural nets for analysis. No, we don't use any type of machine learning currently. And then there's a question here, which is, can I check if there's a data breach because any other apps were installed on the iPhone? Due to the iOS security model, installing apps from like the App Store are very unlikely to cause a data breach unless you're using, you know, you're giving them your username and password for other accounts.
Use a password manager.
Yeah, which is one of the pieces of advice we offer. So question for the audience, what do you do right now for mobile device security, if anything?
Please share, because I know
Password.
the answer is probably nothing for most people.
Password protection, just for logging in,
Okay.
like a code.
Yeah.
They're using
So a
PIN.
lock screen code is
Yeah.
one of the most
Easy.
important things you can do.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't do anything.
So Brinley asked a good question: is when does Face ID come in? This is actually there's a nuance here where my personal threat model is not that of a political dissident or, you know, someone that law enforcement is generally targeting. So I think Face ID is and Touch ID are great security controls, and the reason is because I don't have to type in my password constantly in front of other people. And I actually have switched it so I have a longer password. I don't use the 4 or 6 digit PIN. If you're not, like for mom and dad, that's great advice. For others though, Face ID and Touch ID are bad for security because in some situations, you can be compelled to unlock your phone via Face ID or Touch ID. Or tricked in some cases. Like I've definitely held people's phones up to their face and with Face ID and unlocked it. In general, the most secure thing you can do for the security of your phone is to have a good complex password that you don't use anywhere else. And yeah, as Yura mentioned, Face ID and the masks are not really compatible, which has been incredibly frustrating for me lately. So question, another question. Oh yeah, I mean, if you can afford to have multiple devices, having multiple devices and doing a like physical separation is you know, a good practice. And you see a lot of the cryptocurrency people doing that. So what type of questions do you field for you should not use the same password for everything? What type of questions do you field from friends and family about mobile device security? Oh, virtual keyboards. So software keyboards that you install as a third-party application for like swipe and whatnot. Those initially were very bad choices in like iOS 6 and 7 days, or whenever they first introduced it. But today, for the most part, they're fine. Apple really sandboxed them, so it's very unlikely that they'll leak secrets out to remote servers.
So you gotta kind of disclaimer that with a lot of them, like the primary ones, like
Right.
the most popular ones are probably going to be trustworthy. A lot of these things you're going to have to investigate a little bit, because maybe there's like 3 or 4 or 5 of them or whatever that play by the rules. And then there's some other fresh little upstart that just showed up on the App Store yesterday, and I have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, you have a lot of even regardless of them uploading your or potentially uploading your text, you have local concerns. A big one is they don't have great detection of when you're entering passwords or credit card numbers, so they add those to the local database and they suggest them to you later. So I don't use them. I try to limit the amount of software I install on my phone, and I always stay up to date. So location tracking, it's a good question. How can you really be sure it's off? This gets harder every new iOS version. There are 2 or 3 areas. We have guides for this. Specifically, you can go through and audit them app by app, but your main concern outside of that is Apple themselves. And the way to be sure is to follow the guide. Sadly, it's not as straightforward as I'd like or you'd like, because you can go into this privacy location services option and turn it off, and that will work for the majority of people unless you have the latest phone, which has a new chip where you have to go and turn it off in a different location as well. And I don't have that chip, so I don't have the option to show you. So what about new Mac software that lets you store address and credit card number that doesn't store security codes still? So I don't fully follow your question, Brinley, but I will offer, I use 1Password on my Mac to store all of my secrets, which includes passwords, usernames, credit cards, 2-factor codes in some cases.
Yeah, the 1Password folks have a really good design document for how their crypto works, and we appreciate the level of detail that's in it, and we think it's generally pretty sane.
Yeah. If
That's
you
why we
want to
recommend
use
them.
your keychain feature in your Mac, that's good also. Vanessa, you have a good question. Everyone uses text messages to communicate, and WhatsApp is not very secure. So which one do you recommend to friends? I actually recommend WhatsApp for the vast majority of uses. WhatsApp does have good end-to-end crypto. They have a good security model. There's one major flaw in it, and that's they can an ISP can reset your WhatsApp account to redirect towards them, and that's a you know, a concession they made to make it usable. I yeah, Dan says don't use Telegram. Telegram security model is not as robust as Signal's, as you and they have the problem where they operate generally out of Russia, and they have the possibility of the Russian state security service going in with the rubber hoses and beating the keys out of them.
They also don't have really sane crypto. Like the choices that they've used to build the application appear to obfuscate its functionality. It's not clear exactly why it was built the way that it was. It's not clear what security guarantees the crypto system provides. It really looks like a giant hidden backdoor, and you should not use Telegram. Signal's
Signal
great.
is a good choice,
Yeah.
for sure. I do recommend them. I just don't really find the network isn't very large, so I contact my security friends over Signal, and then for regular people, it's WhatsApp or iMessage for me. If it needs to be super sensitive, I will send a message over Signal, or really an encrypted phone call over Signal is much better. So we're actually coming up on time. Are there any remaining questions about iVerify or Trail of Bits? I have a slide here because we are hiring, which is the whole point of presenting here, actually.
Part of it, yeah.
I mean, yeah. We, as Dan said in the intro, we're a small company. We have one open position. If it's listed down here, hosted on Lever. It has more benefits listed on that Lever link than I could fit in a slide, so I'd only put great benefits in. I highly recommend going and checking that out.
Yeah, and I guess the other part that we didn't state is that iVerify is turning a corner from a personal consumer product to an enterprise one. So if you're working on a big company and this kind of guidance and this kind of data and information seems like something that your employees should use, then you probably want to get on our radar, and you could be one of the first that actually deploys it company-wide.
And then I have this last slide, which finally says my full name.
Picture. It's like 3 years old.
Cool.
Great. Well, thank you so much. If we still have 3 minutes left, so we would love to hear any more questions. If you all have it. I know I did have one actually about iVerify, and that was, how it works. Does it work well internationally as well?
So the iVerify will work internationally on your phone in English. Our app is not localized yet, but it will work on phones that are localized differently.
Yeah, sorry.
In the process of the redesign, we will make localization much easier, and we have in Trail of Bits we have a pretty wide range or wide amount of language knowledge. So we'll have localizations probably in order. It'd probably be Italian, German, Russian, French, and then we'll likely have to outsource localization for any other language, and we'll do that based on feedback from App Store and customers.
Got it. Because in certain countries we start off with unlocked phones, for instance, so it might be kind of quite different. So I was curious about that.
So for Lydia, the position is open for international candidates. We kind of glossed over it, but Trail of Bits is in like 8 countries now, and yeah, that position has the possibility to be full remote.
Yeah, the requirements go up as you get further away from New York, right?
Time zone wise, not physical distance. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's hard for us to hire people that are a junior person if they're going to be halfway around the world, but if there's somebody that's knows what they're doing, then it's pretty easy to grab people no matter where they are. We do. We have internships. We have a winternship that should be open for applicants at the end of the summer. That's a short 3 to 6 week mini internship that we do over the winter break for students. Usually it's based around a single small project, and it's all done remotely. But keep track of our Twitter, and you might see when we put that out.
Yeah, and I guess we'll be putting the job up on fortify.com as well on Trail of Bits' page. So Sandy, you can definitely check it out over there.